So let me just do some quick introductions here. Sahida has joined us from SAP, and she's worked very closely with Natalie on their program. Natalie is also going to be sharing a little bit down the front here as well. We've got Jeanette Purkis, who's actually our keynote speaker for this afternoon, so we'll get to hear more from Jeanette a little bit later. We've got Miriam George, who's part of the talent team at Microsoft, joining us for the employer panel. Of course, we've got Mike Fieldhouse from DXC. We know that his mic works now, so that's really good. We've got Robert from Sunport Group, and of course Matt, who you've heard from ANZ Bank. So I'm going to hand over to Suzanne now. We're going to run this employer panel for about 30 minutes or so. Suzanne is going to open to the floor for Q&A during that time as well, so you have the opportunity to ask questions of the people we have on the panel up here. Thank you.
All right. I am pleased to have an opportunity to draw out a little bit more from these excellent presenters we heard prior to our break, our champions of change in our employer groups. And I'm going to ask each of them a question to get us started, but then we want to have half of this time for you to be able to directly ask questions. And we have roving mics. We're going to give you an opportunity to directly ask your questions to any of the panelists that we have assembled. So, Matt, I'm going to start with you because you are really the newest organization launching here. Isn't that unfair of me? But the question I have is, you obviously were able to engage your leadership. That's why you're launching on this change. And so what advice would you give to others here who are considering this to engage top leadership to start this kind of momentum within your organization?
What I would say to that is that you need to be bold and courageous in doing this. Depending on the sort of organisation that you've been in or the type of work that you've been used to doing, you've probably got levels of line management that you would normally go through to get something done. And one of the things that our mentors said to us is that it's really important that you get executive sponsors. And as we thought about that, we thought, well, there's really no better executive sponsors for us than the top level of the bank. But none of us really knew the top level of the bank, but we knew people that knew the top level of the bank. But we thought if we went that way, it's probably going to take too long. So we just wrote to the top level of the bank and said, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's the reasons. And we just asked them to be our executive sponsors. And it was some intrepidation sending that message because I wasn't sure whether I was going to hear from someone just a little bit up the line from me saying that's not an appropriate thing to do. But actually the culture of the organisation is such that we're really opening up all of those types of opportunities, empowering people and really looking for people to be autonomous. So inside of that, we had the executive sponsors come back and say, hey, we love the idea, we want to sponsor it. So I'd say that the really important thing is to be bold and courageous when you go out and do those sort of activities to get yourself established.
Thank you, Matt, for that. Robert, my question for you is, your program obviously is quite matured and you doubled it, which was quite impressive. We talked about the importance of middle management. Could you share with us how you've been able to get your supervisors on board to support this?
I could probably do better that and ask some of the supervisors who are sitting in the back of the room.
Where are our supervisors? But, where are the supervisors? Okay, great.
Yeah, go ahead.
It wasn't really hard to probably come on board. Probably we've spoken about it for probably 18 months. Previous to that, at least at senior management level. And then we probably rolled it down to the second tier below myself. And it seemed to actually just roll on very quickly. And we talked, I heard about culture before, and it did actually change culture. And with culture, it definitely just took on its own living, breathing organism, basically. And It's actually been a very good program from a management, middle tier management section.
And I think that's the key. I mean, there was trepidation at the start, but that was more from lack of knowledge. It became an easier process because everybody could see the benefits to the organisation and to our autistic candidates. So once they could see the benefits, they embraced it. And as DMAC said, it moved very quickly through the organisation. And we don't believe that people see it as an impost. They see it as something they want to do. And the culture benefits that have arisen have made it, something that's much easier to embed in the business.
That's terrific. Thank you, Robert. Thanks to you both for that input. Jeanette, my next question is for you. Could we have a mic? That's great. Thank you, Natalie. The middle management we know is really important, and we just had great articulation about how to get people on board. What about coworkers? What advice would you give our attendees today about getting coworkers to help make this a success?
Thank you for that question. I think am I on? Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. That's quite an issue, actually, because it's all very good for the employer to have the best will in the world and to employ someone. But if the person's not happy and comfortable in their team, and if they don't feel supported or valued by their co-workers, or there are misunderstandings, it makes the whole employment relationship really negative. And of course, the thing you don't want is for that employment opportunity to become, a lost position, and in that autistic individual's experience, one thing they couldn't do, and taking all those positives and making them negative. And likewise with your co-workers. So I think it comes down to diversity. I think, and genuinely understanding what that means. And not seeing, I find sometimes I've been in workplaces and people say, oh, you're the autistic one, and autism is focused on. When I'm at work, I'm there because I can do my job. The reason I'm employed is not because of warm and fuzzies and let's get one with a disability. The reason I'm employed is because I'm actually doing my job. So seeing employees as employees. It's the same with people in my team. I work with a number of people from other diverse backgrounds. I've got a close colleague who's Aboriginal, and likewise, she doesn't want people just focusing on her Aboriginality. So I think it's that getting past the label and seeing the individual as who they are is helpful.
That's great. Thank you, Jeanette. Sihita, what is one thing you would say to date that SAP has done right that you would tell other people this is something that's useful and when you're on this kind of path? Does anything stand out?
What have they done right? I think
the organisation.
The broader organisation, certainly globally, the work that they've done with Specialist Stern. So just, what achieves a successful journey? So if I look at our experience in Australia and before, I suppose in research of whether we would do it in Australia, it was discussing with Jose, who you saw up on the screen earlier today. I had a number of phone calls with him. It was how do you make this successful? So I think SAP, and I think there were conversations this morning, there is an investment necessary to make sure you set it up to be successful and sustainable. And I think that's one of the things that SAP has done. It hasn't been, and each country within SAP is encouraged to come on board but not mandated. So it's also working out, and for Australia it was us working out when we were ready to start the program, even though for a while there had been a much broader initiative going on in SAP globally. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the key things, is make sure that you invest and prepare to make it successful.
Terrific advice. Thank you very much. Miriam, we didn't get a chance to hear about Microsoft. I know about Microsoft because I've been to Seattle and I've been to the campus and I interact with your colleagues there quite frequently. But can you tell us, can you say something that you know has been problematic, a barrier that you would advise people, this may be there, but you can transcend it? Is there something you have in mind that you've seen as a challenge?
So just some context, we run an autism program in our corporate office in Seattle, which we launched in 2015 and has been piloted. Specifically, we've hired software engineers, data scientists, so quite technical roles as permanent full-time employees. In terms of challenges, I think Microsoft is such a huge organisation, and really it's about getting the word out as to we're doing this program and getting people on board and sharing our experiences. We are looking to implement the program in Australia down the track, so we have our Chief Accessibility Officer coming in a few months to share her experiences with us. So I think it's about bringing people on that journey and having them go through the program as well and be involved as well.
Terrific. Good advice. And Michael, my question to you is, DXC now has been at this a while, and I hear from several of the companies, and I think yours is a good example of how would you advise people to think now as they're initiating programs about scalability for the future? How do you make this happen in a way that we don't have to move quite so slowly and embed this in the initial part of the process, since you have that experience to speak from?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think a couple of learnings for us is really, one is embedding a research or an independent lens on developing a program. I think that gives you a bit of a 360 going forward. So we've learned a lot, obviously, through our relationship with La Trobe and through that process, which we have autism consultants that weekly catch up with La Trobe. But I think that's a good way of actually getting a further innovation into the program. I think one thing is you have to continually innovate. It's always things you have to add to it, but if you don't know what the issues are, how can you actually change what your approach going forward is. The other one, I think, is have a broad collaboration. I think that's one thing we've learnt. Not everyone has all the solutions. And I think, you look at the IT environment particularly, IT's got lots of providers, lots of technology providers, all got bits. I think have a broad range of partners and collaborators and advisors. What enabled us to actually even leapfrog the program is we had a independent set of advisors on the program. So they came from a very diverse set of backgrounds. I've got one here, Kerry Clark, who's the next Air Vice Marshal. His background is in the Air Force. So that, he was a good person to provide very much the risk assessment to the process. So I think if you're going forward is having that kind of broad perspective around the program, but then they'll allow you to put the pillars and foundation in place to scale forward as well.
Great, thank you. And now in the time we have remaining, I want to make sure that our audience has an opportunity to pose your specific questions to our excellent panel. If you would, please raise your hand and let us know, and we will go around with the mics. Any questions from our audience? Yes, and identify yourself. I know who you are, but others may not, Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna from UQ Business School, and I was wondering what the panel thinks about how important is it for leadership to get involved. And Suzanne, you raised this as an important point of implementing a program successfully, and the role of personal experience with autism in the family, or the broader experience that they have. So how important is that personal effectiveness, if I may say, of the cause of autism for leadership to get involved?
I'm certain I'm not going to be the exhaustive final answer of this, but I find leadership at the highest levels of an organisation, especially when it comes from lived experience, either as a parent or a partner or a person on the spectrum themselves, that personal engagement actually drives a passion. So we're all driven by our motivation. And if we know about something and we're interested in it, that's one thing. But if we live it and breathe it and it means something to us, that's huge. And if a senior leader or senior leaders within an organisation have that kind of motivation, that's fantastic. And that's one of the ways you change culture. And as I'm sure you all know, changing organisation is very difficult. So that's actually something really to be encouraged, I would say.
Great, thank you, Jeanette. Anyone else want to comment?
Yes,
Robert.
I suppose for me it was, I didn't have to find a sponsor because I can make the decision. So that was nice, but that actually made me think very carefully about implementing a program like this, given I had a past association. So And because of my past association, I actively disengaged. I didn't want to inflict this on the business because I thought it was a good idea. And it really wasn't until I was, enlightened in terms of how much benefit this could bring to the business outside of the autistic candidates. So in terms of improving the overall HR processes of the business, improving the work environment for all of the other employees, that was the bit that got me over the line. Because of an association, I didn't want to be perceived to be inflicting it on my organisation. So when I had that comfort, I was very happy to proceed, and I'm very glad that we went down that path. So it was a little bit different.
I think, for us, leadership's been absolutely important. If you're not getting to the top levels of your organisation and getting that leadership, then I don't believe you're really setting yourself up for success. Having said that, though, I don't think that the leaders necessarily need to be personally connected in a way with autism. Our leaders aren't in that sense. But certainly we have enough people in the program that are, and I really think that drives the passion and the rapport that you build with leadership in terms of asking them and working with them to be executive sponsors. I think that's where they really gain the position around why they want to get involved in it, because by extension they're getting involved in it through your own personal connection in that way.
Excellent. Other questions? Oh, now we have quite a few. Where is our microphone?
Sorry, could you put your
We have a person there and a person right in the front. Great.
Hi, my name's Maria. I'm with Red Rock. We're a DXC technology company. I have a son who's on the spectrum, recently diagnosed, so I guess I've got a personal interest in this as well. My question is, with the recruitment process, how important is it for the candidates to have some sort of a qualification behind them? Because I guess from my experience, these sort of people may not perform well in the school system. It doesn't really cater to them very well. So they may not assess well to get into a university course or a TAFE course to do well. So I guess my question is, how many of them have a qualification behind them and how many of them are self-taught because they spend a lot of time on the internet trying to hack things?
Anybody want to respond to that? Michael.
I'm very happy here. Obviously, the Dandelion program. So we have quite a range of people on in the program, being double master's degrees to actually people have just just got high school. So we don't really look at qualification as a necessity, but we do look, can they complete something? So in the assessment process itself, it's actually based up on workability, motivation, going through numbers of work examples. So it's actually done over a 4-week period. So there's a whole bunch of other aspects we look at. We do also psychometric testing, looking at capability and learning difficulties. So there's quite an intense part of it. We're trying to get a holistic view of an individual so we can actually make the right decisions for just for the individual, but also for us as an employer.
Thank you very much, Michael. Okay.
Tony Atwood from Minds and Hearts Clinic in Brisbane. Thank you for the descriptions, which seem to be more in the administration, information technology area. But I work as a clinician, and this week I saw a young man in grade 11 who has created his own computer game with a person with autism as the central character, and it's a work of art, and it is magnificent. And when I work with people with ASD, it's not just computer industries, etc. It's the creative industries. Also this week, I saw someone with Asperger's who throughout her career, she's been an excellent photographer. Photography is great for Asperger's because you're behind the lens and it's just you. But she's now decided to take a career in clinical psychology, and I welcome that. And so it's also the caring profession. So it's what I suspect, we have someone here from Microsoft. I think there are more Asperger's in Hollywood than Microsoft. Okay. So what I'd like to see this is extending further into the creative industries and the caring industries, because the Asperger's are there too, and we need to do this with the teaching profession, is supporting that individual. So that's really, it's not a question, it's just a comment.
Can I just add to that? So worked previously at a different organisation, and one of the best HR graduates I ever hired was someone that had Asperger's. And she was the most caring person, and she was fantastic because she could analyse the data, interpret it, and communicate it in a way that was also relatable. So I think it's, you know, it's not about pigeonholing people into, yes, we only hire into these roles, but being also open-minded as well.
Yeah, I support that, very much so. Okay, thank you.
We obviously agree. Our program's based around care. That was why we employed autistics.
Yeah, but for animals,
Yeah.
it's caring.
Other questions, other comments?
Thanks, Suzanne. Kerry Clark. This is for you. I noticed in your presentation you were looking at quantifiable data, and to some extent I was perhaps a little surprised about the size of your data sets given you're in the US of A. Could you break down in some easy way for us to understand who you're targeted in your HR professions? Were they typical of a broad spectrum, or was it geographically based? How did you do that part of work?
That's an excellent question. We worked with the Society for Human Resource Management, which has about 275,000 members. And we took a stratified sample by industry and by employer size. And we had about a 63% response rate. So we took many more, but we took many more companies, and those were our respondents. But your question's an excellent one. I'll also mention that we try to triangulate our understanding by using national data sets. So we archive national administrative data sets like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charges on employment discrimination, and we look at labor trends for the population, and we also do deep dives into companies. I pull that out just as a litmus across companies, but we draw from many different sources, which is really important if you're going to do a good job in this kind of work. Does that respond? Does that answer? Great. One last question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sharuk. I'm with the St. Vincent de Paul Society on the Ability Links program. I guess I had a question about, there's an implicit kind of conversation we're having about high functioning versus low functioning labels, if that makes sense, or about employing people for their talent and their cognitive ability and all of that. I'm wondering if there's room for that conversation, the scope of that conversation to also expand and include, you know, people who might not have sort of like talent as we see it, or, you know, just to expand and include all, because I'm just a little concerned that there's a kind of a replicating of the same kinds of barriers that keep people with disability out, but just in a different kind of high functioning versus low functioning kind of label. And if anyone wants to comment at that, it's just kind of open.
I think, I mean, it comes down to how you define talent, and talent relative to the position you're looking to fill. A very good example for us when we were developing our program was the High Tide Car Wash in the US. Again, they were looking for candidates that had attention to detail, but they actually weren't seeking the highest functioning autistics. They were looking for people that would turn up to work every day on time and do what they were trained to do and do it very well. And that didn't require the highest functioning. And in fact, that's where they preferred to seek candidates, that they found they had a better outcome for the job they were looking to fill. So I think we have to be careful about how we define talent. We are all working in the autistic community, we're working towards identifying what people can contribute and providing an environment in which they can contribute that. And it doesn't just have to be restricted to high functioning.
Jeanette? Yes, can we have a mic for Jeanette?
I can pop up to the lectern if it's quicker.
We have one for you, Jeanette.
Sorry about that, I should have actually realised it was fun. So I think as an autistic person myself, we have to be very careful when we discuss functioning levels, because it is quite a fraught area, and within one person's lifetime they may go through different levels of functioning in different areas. So we do need to be very careful with that. I do get your point there, and I think that is very true. We you know, if it's all based on people like me who are articulate and hop up on stage, it's not going to be very helpful. But I do think when we're talking about functioning, we need to take a broader view than either or. And that would be something I felt, you know, as an autistic advocate, I'd feel a bit remiss not actually discussing that. And that isn't just a political point or a semantic point. It's actually really useful to understand that autistic people, as all human beings do, go through different levels of capability at different things during their life, and things impact on their levels of capability. So in my case, I'll be very brief here, don't worry, you don't get the whole life story, but in my case I was unable to work for 7 years at all, and if I'd done any vocational testing or anything, I would have been highly disadvantaged and very low functioning, and I've now been working in a professional role in the government sector for over 10 years. So I just wanted to say that just to make sure it got said, so thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you. We have another panel, so we are going to end. I want to please join me in thanking these wonderful panelists for their sharing.